Just when we think we've got it all figured out, who's good, who's bad, nope, not in the NFL. Just 12 months ago, the Rams were coming off a trip to the Super Bowl, and Todd Gurley, despite an arthritic knee and practically no showing in the final 2 games, was still coming off one of the most dominant 2-year stretches for a running back in recent memory. In 2017, he was the Offensive Player of the Year with 2,093 yards from scrimmage and 19 total touchdowns. Then in 2018, he followed that up with 1,832 scrimmage yards and 21 touchdowns, carrying the Rams to a 13-3 record and the 2 seed in the NFC. They were the 13th highest scoring offense of all time, but in the final 2 games of the regular season, Gurley was suddenly shut down with soreness in his left knee. After an impressive 115-yard rushing performance against the Cowboys in the divisional round, Gurley received just 4 carries against the Saints and just 10 in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. The Rams scoring just 3 points and Gurley mustering just 35 rushing yards was a precursor for what would transpire in 2019. Despite a respectable 9-7 record, they missed the playoffs and Gurley was released. He is still just 25 years old and is now part of a Falcons offense that has some serious firepower. But the failures of 2019 loom large and beg the questions. What the hell happened? And can he once again find that all-pro form? While it's easy to write Gurley off as just another washed-up running back, I believe there is much more to the situation, and without proper context, we might arrive at the wrong conclusion. In 2018, the Rams had an elite offensive line with literally 0 injuries. All 5 linemen played at least 94% of the snaps and produced a historically great season-long performance. This stat at the top is Football Outsiders' adjusted line yards metric, which removes the running back from the equation as best it can and shows how many yards the offensive line creates by itself. That 5.49 mark is the highest ever recorded in a single season. But in 2019, the Rams lost left guard Roger Saffold to Tennessee, center John Sullivan retired, and right tackle Rob Havenstein got injured halfway through the season. Gurley had just 1,064 yards from scrimmage and averaged 3.8 yards per carry. But how much of that lackluster performance was him and his arthritic knee, and how much was the hodgepodge new-look offensive line? Keep those stats in the back of your mind while we go back to 2018, when the offensive line was elite and everything was going right, to better understand their dominance and just how freaking good Sean McVay can scheme up a defense. McVay has always based his offense around the zone blocking scheme, which thrives on a mobile, athletic offensive line creating double teams and generating seams for the running back, who needs to quickly make one decisive cut and get upfield fast. The best example of this scheme operating at peak capacity came in Week 6 at Denver. Gurley rushed for 208 yards on 28 carries in a game where the Broncos were utterly dominated by the zone blocking scheme. A few tendencies make McVay's system unique. In 2018, he used 3 wide receiver personnel packages 90% of the time, by far the most in the league. What this does is forces the defense to match with nickel personnel groups consisting of more speedy defensive backs and fewer, slower moving linebackers. But instead of spreading the defense with all those receivers like you'd expect, he condenses the formation and brings everybody in tight. Having all 11 guys in the end zone angle isn't very common, but with McVay, it happens often. This is one of the core concepts of the Rams offense. This particular play is called Z-Right 19 Wanda Y Sift. It's an outside zone run concept to the weak side with a split zone and what's called sift action from tight end Tyler Higbee and jet motion right before the snap. Each offensive lineman is going to take a play side bucket step aiming for the inside number of the defensive linemen to drive them towards the sideline. The sifting Higbee will come across the formation and kick out the first defender outside of the tackle, allowing that tackle to climb to the second level. Gurley's job is to read each defensive lineman starting from the outside and working in. A key coaching point is to read their helmets. If the defender has his helmet outside the blocker, that tells Gurley to work to the next defender over until he finds an open gap. Zone concepts always consist of at least one double team. Good offensive lines generate movement up front, then climb to a second level linebacker. This center and left guard combination is called a single block. They both step to the defensive tackle, and if they can generate movement, whoever is less engaged can move up to seal a second level defender. The Broncos get good penetration to the front side. The defensive end sets a hard edge so nothing can get outside of him, forcing the run back inside to where theoretically the rest of the defense is waiting. The D-line wants to shoot their gaps, beat the offensive line to the spot, and force that cutback to the meat of the defense. But because the offensive line has created so much movement, look at how much space Gurley has to cut back. You can see him progressing through each of his reads, and when he sees the nose tackle's helmet inside the guards, he sees a wide open alley where there is nobody. The right tackle seals the linebacker, and Gurley gallops through the Broncos defense. Why is there this much space? Well, that's where McVay's scheme and trickeration comes into play. The Rams are known for their usage of jet motion, where Robert Woods races across the formation before the snap to cause confusion, and every now and then they'll give him a handoff just to keep the defense honest. This triggers a shift from the Broncos. The safety comes down to take Woods, which removes him from the box. As Higbee sifts across the formation, the Broncos have no idea if he's blocking or running to the flat on play action. Linebacker Todd Davis is responsible for Higbee if he does go out for a pass, which takes Davis out of the run fit and away from the play. Since Higbee is not running a route and instead blocking, Davis might as well not even be on the field. Von Miller can't close off the backside because of that play action threat. He's reading Higbee as well and is waiting to charge upfield in case Jared Goff keeps the ball. The defensive line is forcing a cutback to these two defenders, but the scheme has rendered them completely out of position. Why is Von Miller so worried about the play action? In each of the past 3 seasons, the Rams have ranked top 3 in play action usage. This play looks exactly like their favorite play action concept, where Higbee runs to the flat, and wide receiver Brandon Cooks runs a glance route over the middle and behind the charging linebackers defending the run. Cooks even releases off the line like he's running that exact route, but instead delivers a key block on the safety, which springs Gurley for an extra 15 yards. We hear marry the run and pass all the time, and it's a bit cliche. But Sean McVay basically invented the phrase. When every pass looks like every run, it's a nightmare for the defense. Take this example against the Vikings from just a few weeks earlier, and a concept the Broncos game planned for that entire week. The Rams are in a nearly identical formation and look like they're running the same play. Each lineman is taking a big play side bucket step, they have a sift action from wide receiver Cooper Kupp, and Goff looks to be handing off to Gurley on 19 outside zone. It's the exact same look for the defense, and when they commit to stop this punishing run game, it creates wide open spaces all over the field. Instead of blocking the first defender outside the tackle, Kupp races towards the flat where he's technically guarded by a linebacker and picks up an easy first down. Effective play action packages like this one limit the pass rush because the defensive line is trying to fill gaps in the run game rather than penetrating upfield towards the quarterback. This is why we saw Von Miller and Todd Davis just sitting there. Against this Rams offense, you guard against the run or you guard against the pass. But defending both at once, not going to happen. You basically had to guess what they were going to do before the play. Through the regular season, the Rams offense was absolutely rolling. But suddenly against the Eagles in Week 15, Gurley left the game with a knee injury. He was held out in Weeks 16 and 17, and despite a strong showing against the Cowboys in the divisional round where Gurley looked pretty damn fast on a long touchdown run, he was barely used against the Saints in the NFC Championship. Then, the Super Bowl happened. The NFL finally caught up with Sean McVay's scheme, and the results were devastating. Bill Belichick, who in my opinion turned in the finest coaching performance ever, devised a defensive game plan that zigged when everyone else zagged. Instead of matching the speed of the Rams' 3 wide receiver sets with an extra defensive back, the Patriots went heavy and beat them up. Belichick deployed an unconventional 6-1 defense. 4 big, heavy defensive linemen pressed in tight with a linebacker and a safety on the line as well. He wanted more offensive linemen covered by defenders to negate the zone blocking double teams and force the outside zone back inside to all the big uglies. This allowed a linebacker, usually Dante Hightower, to be kept clean from blockers and roam free to match Gurley's movement wherever he went. The D-line didn't have to race towards the sideline, but could instead sit on their blocks. And with the outside defender setting the edge, Gurley and the Rams repeatedly ran straight into the teeth of the defense. How did the Patriots' 6-1 alignment translate to the play-action game? Well, they pretty much took the Rams' strength, their speed, and made it their weakness. So much of that play-action game relies on crossing routes from speedy receivers. The Rams are licking their chops to attack this heavy personnel with speed. They run the same play-action pass that diced up the Vikings, which looks like 19 outside zone sifts with wide receiver Josh Reynolds sifting across the formation. All he has to do is fake the sift block on linebacker Kyle Van Noy. But instead of a wide open flat, easy 10-yard completion, Van Noy absolutely seats him on the floor, and Hightower sinks back to blanket Goff's secondary read. As the game trudged on and the deflated Rams offense produced just 3 points, the Patriots' 6-1 defense continued to completely dominate the game. McVay realized his offense was outmatched, so he shifted his strategy, which foreshadowed much of the way 2019 would play out. To deal with the Patriots' heavy front, he took out a receiver and added a tight end to try and bully the bully. The Rams are running 19 outside zone. Same as before, but without sift action. Gurley will set his track for the outside hip of the offensive lineman, and the Rams do manage to get their center guard single block to come off to the second level and take care of the linebacker. Hightower sets a good, hard edge, and look at the defensive tackle Malcolm Brown. Instead of shooting the gap across the center's face, he's two-gapping, which means instead of attacking one gap and trying to cut off the angle, he's playing more passively and holding his position. He's guarding both gaps to the right and the left of the center. Gurley sees this and the cornerback waiting in the hole anyways, and all he can do is put his head down and try and pick up a yard. Yeah, Gurley didn't produce in the Super Bowl, but nobody on the Rams did either. After the crushing defeat and the unraveling of their dynamic offensive scheme, the offseason was just as harsh when 2 of their 5 offensive linemen departed. The moment after the Super Bowl ended, every coach sprinted to their cave to study and restudy exactly what the Patriots had done. And sure enough, the Rams saw a steady dose of 6-1 defenses throughout 2019. The less talented O-line was challenged week in, week out to blow defenders off the ball, and it just didn't happen. As the interior of the line eroded, so did those cutback lanes and double-team blocks. That meant more second-level defenders free to chase down the running back without having to elude oncoming linemen. The Rams scheme, which was built from condensing the line of scrimmage and bringing the defense in close, was predicated on the offensive line executing those combination blocks and moving on to second-level defenders. Just like in the Super Bowl, the Rams countered the 6-1 defense with 2 tight end packages, which limited their ability to spread out defenses and attack downfield through the air. A Week 11 showdown with the Chicago Bears was a perfect example of the offensive line and scheme struggles. The Bears use a heavy 6-1 defense with those 4 down linemen and 2 linebackers outside. And again, the Rams call their bread and butter 19 outside zone. They have to create movement along the line of scrimmage and enough push for one of their linemen to get off the double team and take on the second level linebacker. The guard center single block has to progress to this linebacker, but they get dominated. Look how the Bears are two-gapping. They're not racing towards the line of scrimmage, they're eating up blocks to limit space and keep the linebacker clean, and are waiting for Gurley to come to them. No movement is gained front side or backside, and everything really is just blown up. Despite the narrative that Gurley's injury made him disappear and his career is over, I really think that storyline is overblown. I believe he's still the same running back talent we've seen before, who couldn't overcome the Rams' schematic and personnel shortcomings. He faced way more 8-man boxes, he was tackled behind the line of scrimmage way more often, and the Rams just could not create movement up front for him to be successful. What made him really stand out in 17 and 18 was actually his work in the passing game. But last season the Rams, most likely to protect his health, cut his targets almost in half. He didn't have the volume to be explosive through the air, and that severely limited his productivity. But there are so many plays from this past season that if I didn't say whether they were from pre or post injury, I don't think anybody could tell the difference. The speed is still there, the acceleration is still there, the power is certainly still there, and going to Atlanta and that offense, he could replicate a lot of his past success. Now, the Falcons have a great offense, and on paper a good offensive line, but they ranked 24th in adjusted line yards themselves last year, and historically, Dirk Cutter is not the guy you want calling plays if you're a running back. So before you watch this and sprint to the podium to draft Todd Gurley in the first round in fantasy, let's just pump the brakes. Will Gurley produce like he did in that 2-year stretch? No, probably not. But he's not done. he's not washed. Can he still play at a high level? Hell yes. Todd Gurley in Atlanta is ready to prove he's still a threat.